Hello, everybody. My name is Zach. Welcome to episode 1 of Do You Pay the One, a segment where we discuss Commander, strategies for building them, deck techs, and various other things relating to the format. Being our first episode, I thought today would be a good day to discuss how to make a Commander deck and what methods I use to make them. So the method I've had the most success with is I separated into lands, ramp, tutors, draw spells, removal, board wipes, and then the things that actually make the deck function. If it's slivers, it's running a bunch of slivers. If it's elves, it's elves. Stuff like that. So the first thing I focus on is lands. Generally, you want between 32 and 36 lands, depending on what kind of deck you're building. I tend to find that mono white, mono red, mono blue, those kind of decks want closer to 32. Decks like mono green, 3-color decks, 5-color decks, those tend to want closer to 36. Sometimes you do deviate a little higher or lower depending on the deck, but the magic number is generally between 32 and 36 lands. After that, we have our ramp spells, cards like Rampant Growth, Nature's Lore, Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, Charcoal Diamond. All of these cards are ramp. They get you more mana. Now, some of them actually pull lands out of the deck, and some of them are just mana rocks that produce mana. You want between 12 to 15 mana rocks or mana ramp cards in your deck. In green, you tend to try to stay a bit more away from the rocks because things like Rampant Growth, Nature's Lore, Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, those are going to be a bit stronger in decks that have green. Decks without green are going to want more Soul Ring, Chromatic Lantern, Coalition Relic, Gilded Lotus. Now the type of rocks and the type of ramp you run do also vary depending on the deck. If you're running super competitive Captain Sisay, you're going to run a lot of ramp that's below 4 mana because your goal is to get Captain Sisay out as soon as possible. But that's a highly competitive deck. If you're playing less competitive decks, or if you're just playing decks that have different curves or different needs. So if you're playing something like Oloro, well, you're going to want Thran Dynamo, Gilded Lotus in there as well as some of the lower cost ones. After that, I tend to focus on the tutors, things that search cards out of your deck. Now keep in mind this is generally not things like Rampant Growth. Things like Crop Rotation and Expedition Map I do count in the tutor category though, because you're looking for a specific type of land with those. Also cards like Demonic Tutor, Worldly Tutor, Enlightened Tutor. Now, the exception I put on this rule is Mono Red. Mono Red doesn't have that many tutors. And things like Gamble in most mono red decks you don't want. You don't want to discard the thing you tutored for usually. The number for this, as I said, is about 7 to 10. You don't want to go above 10, as at that point you start running out of cards to actually, search for, and you're just filling your deck with tutors at that point. After tutors, we go into draw spells. Draw spells, you want, once again, about 7 to 10 of them if you can. Things like Rhystic Study, Mystic Remora, Recurring Insight, Necropotence, various cards like those. Every color has access to draw spells. Red's draw spells tend to be either they make you discard or they're a bit more in the wheeling section, but they're still something you want to put in the deck. After this, we go into removal. For board wipes, you want about 2 to 3 for most decks. Things like Vandal Blast, Cyclonic Rift, Toxic Deluge, Wrath of God. You don't want to go too high on removal. One, if you're running creatures, you're just going to be continually killing your own things. And two, once again, if you're just drawing board wipes, you're not going to draw things that make your deck actually function. We have spot removal, things like Swords to Plowshares, Slaughter Pact, Krosan Grip, Beast Within, Vindicate. These you only want 2 to 3 of as well. Now, spot removal you can run a few more of. If you want to, you can go up to about 5. I would try not to go above that. Now, this list, these do not include things like Duplicant Woodfall Primus, Terrestodon, because those are also very large creatures that have an additional effect. And then we finally get to the part of cards that make your deck function, as I said earlier. Things like slivers, if you're running slivers, elves, goblins, if you're a combo deck, or more specifically, if you're a storm deck, then like Brainstorm, Ponder, or Preordain. I don't count those as draw cards, and generally those aren't good, but if you're a combo deck, then they're pretty nice to have. Or, you know, Panharmonicon if you're running like a Gonti deck. Things like those. I use this method for actually every deck that I make, from highly competitive Captain Sisay to my more casual Elementals deck to the even more casual deck I'm making, 5-color allies. So if you use this method, it's a good way to organize out what you're doing. Generally, we organize by creatures, sorceries, instants, planeswalkers. It's really good for 60 card. In Commander, it doesn't really organize by what you want to be doing, what you want to be getting. I could organize my deck by creatures, but then I'm not going to be like, okay, well, how many of them are doing what I want? How many of them are my slivers? How many of these creatures, or how many of these, you know, instants and sorceries are helping me get those creatures? How many of them are removing my opponent's threats? If you go by instant sorceries and all that, you're also very likely to have a lot of board wipes, a lot more or a lot less draw spells or tutors than you want. I mean, your land base is always going to be fine if you organize like that. But I do find that this method allows you to create more of a fine-tuned deck, put more of what you want in there, and it's good for any level of play. Alright, next up, I'm actually just going to go over one other thing, and that's what I like to call Commander etiquette. So, as we all know, there are various different levels of play. Some people like highly competitive decks, some people like casual decks. You know, everyone has different levels. Sometimes there's a new player, sometimes you have a veteran player. If you're playing with a new group of people, try and make sure that you figure out what the competitive level is. You can't, if you're a new player, you want to make sure that you're not playing with a bunch of, you know, tier 1, you know, $5,000 commander players. And if you're an older commander player who has those $5,000 decks, you want to make sure you're not playing with someone who just bought one out of the box. We all like to play at different levels, and it's a lot of fun, but you do want to make sure that you're not, you know, curb stomping new people and then they're going to lose interest in it. I know that if I went into Commander with an out-of-the-box deck and I suddenly played a bunch of games like those, well, it kind of, you know, wouldn't be as interested in the format after that. And I've seen it happen with some players. So it's always just good to ask. I mean, no one's going to get upset about that. People will be like, oh yeah, I'm just playing with something like this. And if you are an older player, it's always possible, if you like playing with various groups of people, you can always have different levels of decks like what I do. An easy way to do this is if you have, say, a mono green deck, where you can, if by changing about 30 to 40 cards in a deck, you can generally turn it from something competitive into casual, or even if you just want multiple decks in general, you can swap out about 30 to 40 cards. I can go over, I do have another article actually discussing this, and I'm going to post another one in a future installment of Do You Pay the One? Thank you everybody for watching. If you enjoyed this, let us know. This is going to be a permanent new segment on the channel. Occasionally we will have other people joining me in these discussions. Thank you everybody for watching. We'll see you in our next episode.